thank you to J Spatial World. I think this is really an incredibly important topic, especially in 2025. I mean, just see where we are. I still remember, because I see Autodesk here in 1991 using DOS prompts in AutoCAD to do, building in Uttarkashi that had collapsed because of an earthquake. I don't even remember if I look at the youngsters around here, P-line and DOS commands and, all of that is a world from a very long time ago. I have the honor of leading an organization which is essentially an international organization that India has set up. It's called the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. My talk today will be in three parts. The first one, I'm really going to emphasize on disasters and why we need to pay a lot of attention to disasters. The second part will be a very brief introduction to CDRI. And the third one is the opportunity for digitalization to support resilient infrastructure. Because I have now 8 minutes, I'm going to try to go pretty quick through this slide deck. I think a lot of you now see what's going on in the world. Even today, if you open the newspaper or look at BBC or CNN, there is a cyclone coming through the US East Coast. We had examples of hurricanes damaging, destroying power sector lines. This is Hurricane Maria in 2011, where Puerto Rico did not, 2017, where Puerto Rico did not have power for about a year. So disasters, we are seeing more cyclonic activity, we are seeing more floods, we are seeing more heat waves. There's a direct link to infrastructure. Melted roads, buckled railroads. This has a huge economic cost. So this is from 2021. Globally, about $112 billion of losses in asset damage. If you look at last year, you add all of the damage from wildfires in California, this number is actually 4 times that already. So there's a huge economic cost of disasters at a time when we're talking about Viksit Bharat, we're talking about building infrastructure, we're also seeing losses continuing to increase. Sadly for us, these trends are not going in the other direction. They are actually getting worse. Disasters are getting worse, particularly related to hydromet, floods, cyclones, etc. Last year was the hottest year ever recorded. So again, when you're building infrastructure that has to last 30, 40, 50 years, and last year was the hottest year, you can't ignore the fact that you need to now consider extreme heat as a challenge for your infrastructure. So in that context, the Honorable Prime Minister launched this coalition. We are a coalition. And with the ambition that countries around the world need to pay a lot more attention to how do we secure our infrastructure from disasters. For India, it's very real. We are building so much infrastructure in the coming decades that we have to start to understand how do we factor in risk in our infrastructure building or upgrading. At the same time, how do we bring this to other countries? There are countries around the world that are building infrastructure, upgrading infrastructure, etc. So it was a vision from the Prime Minister's office that India should really lead such a coalition. This was launched in 2019 at the Climate Summit in New York. I'm very proud to say that 50 countries have already joined CDRI, and there are 8 organizations, actually, as of this morning, 9 organizations have now joined CDRI. The latest is CDMA from the Caribbean. And these are members who are essentially saying, this is a topic that's of interest to us, and we want to come together to share knowledge, to look at new ways of addressing this challenge. CDRI, the secretariat that I lead, is already now supporting around 40 plus countries around the world. These are all technical studies. These are all new kinds of research, frameworks to look at how do we integrate resilience into infrastructure planning. When you look at the opportunity for digitalization, we have a report that's going to come out later at the COP in Brazil, but we're breaking it down into 3 parts. One is the data value chain. The The second is the whole point of communication and the role of digitalization in communication during disasters. And then how do you support actions which can help to strengthen infrastructure, improve safety, etc. So we've started to, come up with a framing of how do we actually look at digitalization for resilient infrastructure. I'm going to use an example of a framework that we have developed, where if you look at the central part, the idea is that if you look at that flat line, when there is a disaster, your infrastructure asset stops functioning, or the road gets damaged, the bridge gets damaged, and there is actually a dip in its functionality. That stays for a while, and then that recovers. So if you look at that curve, it's essentially at a point of an earthquake or a flood or a cyclone, something happens to the infrastructure, the performance goes down, it stays down, and then it comes back up. Resilience is actually about the ability of infrastructure to absorb. So how can you actually reduce the damage at the point of that event? How do you recover, reduce the duration of that period, and how do you recover faster? That's really when we talk about resilience, we're trying to push this agenda. And in that context, technology can start to come and play a lot of different roles. So for example, 3D printing of shelters and homes to recover quickly, 360 imagery in post-earthquake reconstruction, AI-tailored early warning. So all of these elements can support that whole concept of how do you reduce the impact of an event, how do you keep the period reduced, and how do you recover quickly. So this will be in a report that we'll be publishing at COP 30 in Belém coming up. The other thing we've done is, because we now have 50 countries and we continue to add countries, we needed a common vocabulary to understand how do we talk to the finance ministry, the transportation ministry, the power ministry, to actually start to get them to pay attention to risk. So we actually built a global probabilistic risk model for the entire world, which has actually factored in 8 kinds of infrastructure and 6 kinds of hazards, with the intention that at a national level, a country should be able to understand what is the amount of losses it can sustain because of all of the various hazards. Again, earthquakes, landslides, floods, cyclones, etc., etc. Now, when you start to aggregate that, you realize that a country like India, we can see in a given year about $32 billion of average annual loss because of disasters to our infrastructure assets. That's a very big number if you talk to the finance ministry. And then when you say that that's only the asset loss, that's not actually the economic loss. The economic loss is a multiplier of the asset loss. Certainly there's a lot more attention that we can get, because it's a topic that is still not well understood. Why do you need to pay attention to disasters? It's because of the economic loss that you can actually suffer if you're not paying attention to it. So we've got this model. So I'd welcome all of you to go online, and it's in the public domain. We purposely put this in the public domain. Go look at it at a different country levels. So I talk to various ambassadors, I talk to various leaders from different governments, and I tell them that in your country, do you realize that your asset is, you can suffer this level of impact. Second thing we've started to do is using, again, geospatial information for risk assessments. This is a very traditional, anybody in the disaster field knows what a risk assessment is, but then we actually started to use that for infrastructure. In this case, we actually worked with the government of Odisha to understand that in the 60-kilometer coastal area in Odisha, how will the power transmission distribution system function? Where are the vulnerabilities? And how should the government address that from a point of understanding? Certain risks need to be prioritized, certain areas need to be prioritized. So that prioritization actually we've done for the government, and they're now looking at building an entire program around strengthening the infrastructure. So again, digitalization for risk assessments is going to be more and more critical in the coming decades. The third part is we're really starting to push for more innovation in this space. So we sponsor a lot of fellowships around around the world. And just some examples of in Dominican Republic, they're looking at AI for early warning. There was a team looking at how river morphology changes and what can be the impact on bridges over time. So again, there's a lot of opportunities, and I was looking yesterday, across 4 cohorts, we have about 25 such similar examples of innovation in using technology for understanding, how do you sort of look at newer ways of addressing risks. I think that was probably my last slide. So let me leave you there. I think we are really a new organization, very, very new. You may ask me on collaboration, so I'll just answer that already. We're very new. Our function is, we are in the public domain. We are here to work with the industry, with government, be the interlocutor for saying how are other parts, like how are members across the coalition working on an agenda, and how do we spur innovation in that space? That's really where we think of ourselves in the space of digitalization for resident infrastructure. So happy to work with anybody. Thank you.